Back and he's selling already. We got a ton to get to. Jay Leman is with us the entire hour. We're going to have the Illini Athletic Director in a bit. But since Jay's here, we're going to talk about the big story today. And today's big story is the battles going on in camp at the quarterback position. Some of them you might say, well, that's only technically a battle. We think we know who it's going to be. Some of them seems like it might go up until the first snap. In fact, last year we had a couple teams where we didn't even know who was going to be the starting quarterback until they just walked out for the first drive of the day. Let me ask you this, before we get into camp battles, quarterback specifically, we were just talking off air about this. There are so many different things you want in a quarterback. Leadership, accuracy, strong arm, nowadays the ability to run. What's the number one thing for you that you more than anything want to see in a QB?
For me, it's accuracy. Can you put the ball on the money when you need it most, right? I mean, that's the biggest thing. I mean, I don't care how strong your arm is. If you can't hit anything with it, who cares, right? How mobile you are. We've seen mobile quarterbacks who can't throw. They don't last very long in this league or in the professional league. I would say this. We look at Drew Brees, the most accurate quarterback of all time, as far as the NFL goes. Didn't have a rocket arm, but he put the ball on the money all the time. And I would say he made his receivers better every team he was on. He never really had a superstar receiver, maybe Michael Thomas near the end, but not a lot of superstar receivers for Drew Brees.
Right. So the quarterback position is an interesting battle to have when you're in summer camp. Because we all know, it's been said for a long time, it's the most important position in all of sports. More is required of the quarterback than anything else. They're almost always the captain. They're almost always the vocal leader. So what is it like when you're in a camp? For those 6 teams we showed up there, they don't know 100% who's going to be the most important guy on their team right now. What's that like?
Well, here's the thing. I think the coaches like to put a facade up that, we don't know who the guy who's going to be the starter, but the reality is they've been looking since last November, since last December. How do these guys work out? How do these guys train? How are they off the field? How are they in the classroom? And the teammates that play with these guys, I think they already know who the guy is.
You think all of them?
Not all of them, but okay. I think a lot of them, it's 90-95%. There'd probably a consensus among players that this guy's going to be the guy because we get to see every drill. We get to see how he does in live reps, what he does off the field, what kind of leader, how accurate is he. All these things play into it. So I think these quarterback battles are a lot of, I don't know. I don't want to say it's just a total facade and semantics, but some of it is because I don't want to give away all my secrets. Maybe I got one mobile guy, one pro-style guy. I just don't see that. I see that the teammates probably know who the starter is going to be.
Okay, so for example, at Big Ten Football Media Days a couple weeks ago in Indianapolis, everyone at Penn State, including the head coach and every player, said, whoever our quarterback's going to be, we think blah, blah, blah. None of them said, well, Drew Aller is going to be blah, blah, blah. In fact, one of the players said to me, we really like Drew and we like Bo Prabula.
Right.
So, that feels on paper to something that those of us who aren't at every practice go, well, it's clearly going to be Drew Aller.
Well, listen, it feels on paper, but let's just say this. It wouldn't be the first time that a player is coached up by a coach on what to say to the media, number one, right? Let's just get that. So we think we're getting the truth all the time. We might just be getting a token line that they're supposed to say. Number two, you got friends on the football team, right? I might be the roommate with the backup, but the starter who's going to be the starter is, probably going to win the job, but I want to throw my roommate under the bus. He's my friend. So there's a lot of different dynamics that play into it. And what do I gain as a player that comes out and says, this is our guy, he's the best? That just brings division. So they're coached up on what to say a lot of times. I'm not saying everybody, but I'm saying a lot of times they're coached up on what to say. And they know deep down, and most of those guys know, who the starter is going to be at this point in camp.
So then why isn't a coach naming it? Is it just the concept that we'd rather get 10 more days of competition to get the best out of everyone?
Why is it that when we go to announce football games, sometimes we don't even get a roster with a 2D? I mean, there's lots of questions, right?
Yeah.
Why is the Easter Bunny the mascot for Easter? I don't know, but there's a lot of different questions I don't know the answer to, but there is a paranoia, a quirkiness among college football coaches, among coaches in general, I believe, that if I can keep as much information secret as possible, especially the most important position in sports, which you said is the quarterback, I wholeheartedly agree, then I can have some advantage over my team. And that could mean that I could get one more win, which could be the difference between a bowl game, a Big Ten championship, maybe a playoff berth, maybe keeping my job. So what benefit do I have to being open with everything and saying, yeah, he's going to be our starter, he's our guy?
Right. The Easter Bunny is the mascot for Easter.
I
never thought. I mean, listen, when he's got that name, thank goodness he found the right holiday. I mean, if he was the Easter Bunny but the mascot for Arbor Day, there'd be a problem.
I mean, I never really figured it out. Santa Claus makes sense because he brings the gift. The turkey for Thanksgiving because, well, you eat turkey. The other ones I just haven't figured out yet, but I'm slow on the uptake, so I'm going to work on that.
Bunnies and eggs, it all makes perfect sense.
Perfect sense.
What about a quarterback battle at a place like Ohio State? Everything's different.
Sure.
Listen, every year on signing day, they have a top 5 class nationally. Every year, they're bringing in 1 or 2 different guys who are quarterbacks who are 4 or 5 stars themselves. How's it different when there's a QB battle in Columbus?
Well, I think the stakes are much higher in Columbus, right? I think number 1, you're picking a quarterback that can beat Michigan. Number 2, win the Big Ten. And number 3, win a national championship. I think every year we're like, how are they going to replace Dwayne Haskins? Well, Justin Fields came along and transferred from Georgia. And there was questions there because, Justin Fields didn't actually beat out Jake Fromm when he was there at Georgia.
Right.
But he comes in and plays and was lights out that first year as a starter. Then Justin Fields moves on, and there's this guy named C.J. Stroud. He plays decent in his first game against Minnesota. People are like, is this guy that good? Well, yeah, he's like the second pick overall, right? So Ryan Day, Brian Hartline, those guys know how to develop not only quarterbacks but receivers, right? They've got receivers. We know that. We know that Marvin Harrison, you're probably the best player overall in the Big Ten, maybe the country. Is going to be a great friend to whoever the quarterback is. But how does it differ? The stakes are much higher, and I believe you have to be the guy that can make plays when everything else breaks down. Right. You can't necessarily rely on all the other weapons when you're at Ohio State because there's going to be a time when you have to be the guy.
And the great thing, I feel like, in any endeavor, whether it's work or family or sports, you want people to put you in a position to succeed, right? And I was saying yesterday on this show about Drew Aller at Penn State, it's the perfect situation for him because last year he's got the super senior in front of him. Right. He gets to sit back. There's no pressure. Franklin makes sure to put him in 10 different games so he gets actual experience. Like the road has been laid ahead for Drew Aller. With Ohio State, there weren't many reps for McCord or for Brown in terms of last year, but you are talking about Trevion Henderson, an all Big Ten running back. You're talking about an offensive line overflowing with 4 and 5 stars. You're talking the best wide receiver room in the country. Like, whoever it is that wins that Ohio State spot, the pressure's going to be off because there's so many different people that can help pick up the slack.
Tons of weapons. And I would say this. I think Trevion Henderson is a guy, and we'll talk about him a little bit later in the show, but he's a guy in the run game they've got to get going because that's the biggest help to a young quarterback. I wouldn't say young. Kyle McCord's been there a couple of years. Let's just say inexperienced quarterback in live reps. But I think whoever gets that starting job is in running to be a Big Ten quarterback of the year. Now, there's J.J. McCarthy. There's some other great players, right?
Totally agree.
But you're going to have the weapons and the numbers that you're going to say, how do we not give it to this guy? When you throw 50 touchdown passes, like, how do you not give it to that guy, right? And that's been done a couple times by an Ohio State quarterback.
I think there was like I forget who did it, but there was an early Heisman poll, and like in the top 10 list, one of the slots was whoever's the Ohio State quarterback. Like that was they admitted we don't know who it'll be, but they're going to be in the Heisman discussion because of everybody around them.
And absolutely, with the system they run, with the athletes they have, it's going to happen. Now, I think it's a little bit different, Mike, when we look at maybe a program that's not as high echelon as Ohio State, competing for national championships. When I think about quarterback battles, because I think there's a strange dynamic. Sometimes I can win right now with a guy who's a fifth-year senior, but if I'm trying to build and try to be in year 2, 3, and 4 of a program build, I want to play this young guy to get him reps right now. And if I don't play this young guy with the transfer portal, will he leave? If I don't give him some reps, right? And so I think there's interesting dynamics that play out in a team that maybe is not competing for a national championship year in, year out, but maybe the goal is to get to 6, 7, 8, 9 wins.
Right.
Who gives us the best chance now? Who gives us the best chance in 2024, 2025, 2026?
And we showed the graphic earlier about the Big Ten teams that had a quarterback battle, and there are teams that fit that bill, like you're saying. A Michigan State, who's coming off a disappointing year, and Illinois, there you see the list again. Illinois, Indiana, MSU, Northwestern, Ohio State, and Penn State. Those bottom two are fighting for a national championship, but different goals for all these other schools. And Illinois found success last year, wants to stay there, if not go higher. Those other 3 programs trying to get bowl eligible plus.
Right, and so it's like, okay, I can win right now, and I got a transfer quarterback that I want to put in right now. We have that. Then there's that young quarterback, right, that you're like, hey, this is the time for him to get reps, and if I don't give him reps, will he actually stay here? I think that's something that coaches have to actually think about now. Usually it was 4 or 5 years you're going to be here, you're stuck, you're not leaving. With the transfer portal, that's totally changed. We have a ton of players that are going to be starters out of the transfer portal in the Big Ten Conference, right? Yeah. Cade McNamara, probably the highest profile guy with Iowa, who looks to be the obvious starter at Iowa.
So let me follow up with that then. So you were a superstar defensive player at the University of Illinois. If you were a star defensive player at Iowa, which there are an awful lot this year, and you saw last year where there might have been a competition, you didn't necessarily get great results at all from the quarterback play, now you're going to a system where you walk in and know that transfer, Cade McNamara, is your guy. What's that feel like from a guy who's unassociated with the offense at all to know this year we're clear-cut who our quarterback is?
Well, I think at Iowa it's a little different. I just want somebody's going to score some more points, right? I mean, they were anemic on offense. As good as they were on defense, they were probably that poor on offense, right? So if I'm a defensive guy, I want you to put up some points. Now, not too many points because I want to be on the field some, right? Because I don't, if I play for Minnesota, I'm a defensive guy, I'm kind of crabby because, we might be winning, but they were on the field like 62% of the time in time of possession, right? So then my stats are going down. Let's just be real, right? Because defensive guys care about stats. We think offensive guys only care about stats. Defensive guys care about stats, right? I want my offense to be reliable, control the game, win the game, get points. So if I'm a defensive guy and I see a transfer quarterback come in or any offensive weapon come in, I'm like, thank you, we'll take him. And if you're the best player, you're going to play. I think Cade McNamara is probably the best quarterback in camp this fall.
What is the dynamic like if you're a proven defensive player and you've got someone on offense who's unproven? I assume the mindset is still like win every play, do my very best.
Yes.
But there's got to be part of me that's like, I want him to succeed because we need them to succeed. I just don't want him to succeed against me in practice.
Sure. I mean, what's interesting about camp is that it's competition between you and your teammates, right? It's one of the only times, other than spring football, the only time during the fall you really go against your teammates, ones versus ones, first team versus first team, in a very competitive setting. So you always want to defeat your matchup, whether that's a lineman, whether that's a tailback, whether that's a quarterback going on a one-on-one coverage with a receiver and a defensive back. You always want to win that, but you want them to succeed as well. But the way we make each other better in camp is we give our best, right? And so I think this is a really unique time for defenders as well. This is one of the only time defenders get live action, live tackling. You're asking a defender, their number one skill is to tackle the ball carrier. Second to that is getting off of blocks. This is the only time in the fall that you're actually going to be able to tackle somebody live. And you got to keep those starters on the other side healthy, right? Because you don't want anybody banged up. That's priority number one. But you got to keep people healthy. So a lot of times in week 1 and week 2 as a veteran defender, you'll see a lot of missed tackles. You'll see a lot of missed tackles in bowl games because we don't practice the live tackling like we want to.
I mentioned Jay was a great defensive player at Illinois. The 2007 season, you played in what bowl game?
The Rose Bowl.
And who'd you play against?
USC.
And are they going to be joining the Big Ten soon?
I think they're going to join because they played against us and they beat us. They thought maybe we should go over to that conference where Illinois is at.
Well, it's time for the big interview, and it's always a good time to bring in Josh Whitman, the athletic director at the University of Illinois, a well-connected guy and a guy whose programs at his school are almost all seemingly rising right now. Josh, I want to ask you a lot about Illinois stuff, but we have to start with the big picture of what's been happening in the Big Ten. Not sure if you heard, couple news items recently.
It's been a slow week. I haven't been paying attention.
So Oregon and Washington, from the outside, it felt like it happened really fast. What did it feel like from your point of view?
From the inside, I think it was an ongoing conversation. We knew that the move that we made a year ago was going to precipitate some additional movement across the country. We didn't necessarily know what that meant, but we certainly stayed abreast of some of the changes, some of the moving pieces. And so there was conversation and ultimately just really excited about Oregon and Washington, the fit, the academic profile, the athletic success that they bring to the table. And I know our student athletes are excited about the opportunity to compete against such really well-respected programs.
Well, and that's the thing. The pros are obvious, right? These are two well-known brand name programs with good cities, good fan bases, good stadiums, all that stuff. The cons are obvious too, the travel issues that were still there with the LA schools. But this is stuff, again, that we were talking outside of it. For those who were inside, what were the topics of discussion like last week?
I think it's a lot of what people would imagine. I do think that some of the story has gotten out in the wrong direction. I think people have assumed this is, quote unquote, all about the money. The reality is there isn't new money for the existing Big Ten members for a number of years in this arrangement. We want to make sure we provide Oregon and Washington the resources that they need to be successful. But as we come back into the marketplace at the end of our current media deal, we'll see what that is in a position to do for us as a conference and as individual member institutions. But on the flip side, the conversation around travel, around student athlete welfare, obviously those are things that are very core to our mission here at Illinois and across the Big Ten Conference. And so we had extended conversation about what that would look like, how it'll feel. The reality is that most of our teams are already making extensive non-conference trips anyway, and that most of our teams also are engaging or I should say some of our teams are engaging in just postseason competition within the Big Ten. Here at Illinois, for example, we're only looking at 7 teams outside of football, men's and women's basketball, and our championship-only performers that will be looking to create a conference-based regular season schedule. And in talking with the Big Ten, we know that those schools will only be asked to go west no more than one time. And so we think there's some ways to make sure that we minimize some of those on-the-road experiences for our student athletes. But again, it's a great opportunity for them to get out, get west, see a new part of the country, compete against some of the best in college sports, and we're excited about the challenge.
All right, so here's the question that every time it's been posed to me, I've been dead wrong about. Let's try it with you, Josh. What's next?
What's next? I don't know. I think that certainly we have to continue to watch the landscape. There's no question that things continue to evolve very quickly around college athletics. I don't anticipate anything imminent for the Big Ten, but also we've learned anything these last several weeks or years that things can change very quickly. It's clear that college athletics remains in a state of intense disruption. I think the Big Ten has to be a very important player in helping to create what the future of college athletics will look like. I think that's a part of the story that hasn't been told much, and as we've evaluated expansion, is adding schools like Washington and Oregon gives us a stronger voice in the national conversation as we try and reshape the future of college athletics, as we look to try and navigate some of these waters involving name, image, likeness, student athlete benefits, potentially compensation, the transfer portal, sports gambling. All those things are obviously issues where the Big Ten has strong opinions. And now as we continue to grow our voice, hopefully can provide some leadership and some influence over what that future for college athletics can look like.
I mentioned your school has a handful of programs where the arrow is pointing up, none more brightly than the football program after 8-win season last year. The fans seem to have noticed this, Josh. You guys have sold more than 10,000 new season ticket holders. Give me some big picture perspective on what that means at U of I.
It's a big deal for us. As you would imagine, last year we were in the low 20,000s in terms of our total season tickets. This year we'll be in the low to mid 30,000s. It's a significant uptick for us. It's the most new single season tickets that we've sold, I think, since after the Rose Bowl back in the 2007 season, the 2008 Rose Bowl. Our fans are excited. We've got great fans here at the University of Illinois. They respond every time we put good teams out on the field or on the court. And we've seen that excitement in State Farm Center these last 4 or 5 years with the success of our basketball programs. And now we're starting to translate that across the street into Memorial Stadium. It's been a big point of emphasis for us as we head into this new year, and our fans have really grasped the understanding of what that building can feel like. They remember the vibes that can be in there when the place is full and there's great energy, and we're committed to making sure that happens again for us starting this fall.
All right, AD hat off for this next question, football hat on. You're a guy who knows the sport very well, played tight end at Illinois. When you watch this football team and you know what's coming this year, what is it that has you excited?
I see a bunch of guys that have learned how to win. Last year, I think that was certainly part of the process of Brett's first 2 seasons, really, was teaching the guys how to push through those hard games, how to overcome adversity, how to come out on the other side of a tight game as a victor. And now to have that understanding, learning how to persevere throughout the entirety of the season. You heard Coach B at the media days a few weeks back talk about really looking at last year as 2 distinct segments. We had the 7-1 start, and then obviously we stumbled a little bit down the stretch, and now it's making sure that we understand the ongoing effort that is required to sustain that level of excellence throughout the entirety of the season. We've got a veteran group, a bunch of guys who are excited to be here. They play well together. They're really responding well to Coach B's leadership and the staff that we've been able to put together. And so it's a group that's confident, that's hungry, that knows that they had an opportunity a year ago to do some things that were really, really special, and we just missed the mark. And they're looking forward to a chance to get out on the field this year and take those final steps.
If you look at the football schedule, week 2, you guys play the Jayhawks on a Friday. Last year, you guys had a Friday game as well. You had a Thursday game last year also. Is this going to be more frequent in the future, weekday games for the Illini program?
I think I don't know if more frequent is the right term. It's something that we have tried to use strategically over the last several years to try and separate our football program away from the pack on a traditional Saturday afternoon. We certainly want to make sure that Saturdays remain the core of Illinois football. We want our fans to know that on fall Saturdays, Memorial Stadium is the place where we want them to be. But we also know that there are occasional opportunities that present themselves where we can take a game that maybe on a Saturday afternoon wouldn't garner a lot of national attention. We can move it away from the group and put it into a preferred time slot on a Thursday or a Friday, gather a national television audience. We're trying to be a disruptive brand with Fighting Illini football right now, and the opportunity for us to gain a new audience, allow people to see some of the good things that are happening here in Champaign and in Memorial Stadium is pretty compelling. And so, again, we won't take too much of the opportunity, but when those moments present themselves, we're always going to be willing to listen and consider how that might ultimately benefit Illinois football.
Last one for you, Josh. This summer, the football program brought in this guy as a recruiting assistant, Houston Griffith. I'm just worried about, listen, great mom, great siblings. I don't know if you did enough research on the dad, and I'm worried. It just feels sketchy to me.
It's a fair point, and I take it under advisement. You know, we think the world of Houston. He's tremendous. He's come on board and hit the ground running. But I don't know that we did enough background check there. And there's some legacy issues that really give us some pause. But, it's really been a great fit. We've actually been fortunate. I was looking out at practice the other day, and we have probably 5 or 6 current players or staff members who are in some way connected to the history of the program, whether their legacies, their parents were part of Illinois athletics, not all in football, some baseball, some volleyball, or perhaps their family members were previous coaches on our staff. And so it's really been cool to see some of that connection to our past come through in our present. And I know that's something that matters to Coach Bielema, and I think will be a real focal point for us as we continue to grow as a program looking into the future.
And it's a credit to Houston Griffith and his mom's genes for being able to overcome everything that he had to fight in his life. Josh Whitman, AD at Illinois. Always great talking to you, man. We appreciate the time.
Thanks, Mike. Talk to you soon.
Well, it's time for the Big Five, something we're going to be doing all week long this week and next week as well, asking our analysts to pick the 5 best players at a certain position that they see as we enter this upcoming season. Yesterday we did QBs. Today we're focusing on running backs. So 5-1, we asked Jay to think through every one of the 14 teams, starters, backups, whatever. Give us your 5 best players. I got to say, the 5th one, the first one we're going to go through here, number 5 on your list is one I didn't see coming because we haven't seen a lot of them. Tell me who it is and why.
Sean Tyler, Western Michigan transfer, going to Minnesota now. And I like Sean Tyler for a couple of reasons. He's back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons for the Broncos, right? And what I like about him is his ability to just break out on a big run, not just have the power. You know, they've had some power backs, Mo Ibrahim and whatnot, but this guy has the speed to go the distance. But I also look at Minnesota as a football program. 281 pass attempts last year, last in the Big Ten. 62% ball. They possess the ball. They lead the league in time of possession. They usually have the ball 62% of the time. They're going to run the football. If I'm a transfer portal guy, that's where I want to go, right? So I look at who's going to be the most productive, who's going to have the most yards. You have to take into account the system. And PJ Fleck, for as much as he develops receivers, which he has, he's developed a pretty strong running game. Now they're losing John Michael Schmitz and have a new offensive coordinator, but I still believe they're going to run the football and try to win the time of possession battle. That's going to help Sean Tyler get a lot of yards.
Tyler's in an interesting position because the pressure is clearly on. Like you said, they like to run the ball a lot. B, because Mo Ibrahim, the guy he's replacing, is the greatest running back statistically that the program ever had. A different sort of pressure for the number 4 guy on your list in Ohio State's TreVeyon Henderson. Different pressure because the quarterback's uncertain, which puts more pressure on him, but really talented offensive line, unbelievable wide receivers helping him out.
Well, TreVeyon Henderson is a guy probably had a better season in 2021 than he did in 2022, but it was injured in 2022. Only really played 8 games. He's a guy that's as talented as anybody. If he stays healthy, and they're trying to help a young quarterback, whoever that may be, if it's McCord or someone else, he's going to get the reps, and they're going to run the football. And I think TreVeyon Henderson has everything you're looking for: the speed, the power, the ability to make people miss in open space. Highly recruited guy, like all Ohio State running backs are. But he's a guy, if he can stay healthy, could be number 1 or even number 2 on this list. And that's what I think about TreVeyon Henderson and his ability. Now, he splits carries with Mayan Williams and whatnot. So there's not always a ton of carries to go around. They got to throw the football to other receivers. So touches is a big deal when you're at Ohio State. How many times they can touch the ball? Because Marvin Harrison's got to get his.
Right, for sure. Emeka Ibuka, Julian Fleming,
Right.
all these guys
Cade
want
Stover.
to get. Exactly.
They all got to get the ball in their hands.
Yeah.
So how many carries is he actually going to get? I think that's the big question.
For number 3, you're taking us to Madison, where it's a little bit of a different situation for Braylon Allen this season.
Yeah, well, Braylon Allen is a guy that I would call a traditional 7-yard deep back. You know, you line up in the eye, Mike, you got 7 yards for a big back to get going, kind of like a freight train, right? Maybe not the fastest accelerator, but when he gets his shoulder pads downhill, he's a load to bring down. Now, when I look at Phil Longo's offensive system, there's a lot of spread concepts. This is really the first time we've really been out of that Barry Alvarez mold in the last 30 years, right, of running the football. So what does that look like for Braylon Allen? A bona fide talent, no doubt, when he's healthy. Very hard to bring down, especially when he gets to that second level. There's a lot of defensive backs making business decisions. I mean, we see a lot of guys just duck it over the left, duck it over the right. I don't know what they're thinking about, but they're not thinking about tackling the guy, right? They're thinking about avoiding him. So my question is, when you line him up in the shotgun and you got to start next to the quarterback, that's a little bit different than starting with a 7-yard depth back out of the eye, right? And so can he get that acceleration going? Is he going to hit the hole as fast? Is Phil Longo going to spread the field out so there's less guys in the box so that Braylon Allen actually has fewer guys to make miss or run over?
Back-to-back 1,200-yard seasons for Braylon Allen in Madison, where, again, it's going to be
Addison's a good name, too,
Addison would work if it were his name.
But it's not. But it was good. Good recovery.
How about the Big Ten Freshman of the Year? Nicholas Singleton is your number 2 guy.
Yeah, I mean, this guy was special last year, right? I mean, I think run game's been a hole for the Nittany Lions at times. But they had some good backs, though, right? They've had Saquon Barkley. They've had Miles Sanders. How are those guys doing in the NFL? Pretty good? Pretty good, I would say, right? So
and Katron Allen, the backup.
Katron Allen,
you could argue he might belong
he
on
had
this
over
list.
900 yards, right? And there's a lot of backups on this list that could be in the top 5, right? And so I think the running game, especially with a young quarterback who it looks like it's going to be a young quarterback, inexperienced at least, at Penn State, you got to have a good run game. And I think the difference between Penn State getting into that Michigan-Ohio State conversation is, can they run the football consistently, right? Can they control the game? Can they wear down opponents with their offensive line, possibly the best left tackle in the country? They're just working and grinding teams out. I think that's really important. Katron Allen is a guy that can also put up a bunch of yards as well. So
Yeah.
I definitely don't want to minimize him by putting Singleton ahead, but they're both dynamic players.
Well, we only asked you to come up with a list of 5. If we asked you to do 10, I bet Allen would have been on there. I bet Donovan Edwards would have been on there at Michigan.
Right.
He's not on this list because the guy technically ahead of him is your number 1.
Yeah, Blake Corum. I mean, can you go with anybody else after what he did? I think it was through 10 games, but he missed the last 3 games of the season. If he doesn't get hurt in that Illinois game, he is for sure going to New York as a Heisman finalist. And I'm not saying he would have won the Heisman. I'm saying he would have been there. You look at his production, what he did, 247 carries, a workhorse, lots of TDs, 18 touchdowns, knows how to get in the end zone. But when he goes out, to your point, Donovan Edwards had 520 yards in 3 games, right? A lot of big game-changing runs in that Ohio State game as well. So that 1-2 punch, along with their offensive line and the consistency that Jim Harbaugh has been, they've been the most physical team in the Big Ten over the last 2 years. Hence, they've won the Big Ten over the last 2 years. And it always starts in that run game. And I think the combination of J.J. McCarthy's athleticism as a quarterback runner opens up so many more options for these running backs to actually get more holes, because you got to account for J.J. McCarthy running the football, and that's one less defenders that Corum or Edwards have to make miss.
Yeah, you mentioned all those great stats for Corum, but remember he was injured and missed multiple games. I mean, 1,400 yards rushing last year and missed multiple games because of his injury. Who knows what he could put up this year if he's got a full season. So that's your big five running backs. But you mentioned at number 3, Braylon Allen was in there from Wisconsin, and he's already the latest in an incredible line of Wisconsin running backs. Every couple of years there's somebody new who goes down as an all-time great. So we had a chance to talk to him earlier this year. We asked him to build the ultimate Wisconsin running back piece by piece. Here's what he said.
So I would take my frame, 6'2", 245. I would go Monty Ball vision. He's got great vision. He does. The film I've watched, he had, 28 touchdowns in a season, and they weren't just, the play gets split open like this down the middle and he's just fast enough to make it. He's making ridiculous cuts, kind of slithering through these creases that I think the average back doesn't find. So I think that's one of the greater parts of his game. So I'm taking Monty Ball for vision. Speed, I'm taking JT. It's the fastest ball carrier in the NFL last year, 2021, 2 years ago. I'm taking Melvin Gordon's stiff arm. That was something when I was young I admired so much, was like he's just throwing dudes off of him, running down the sideline. He has a great stiff arm. I'm taking James White route running, pass catching ability. And pass protection. We'll take him as like the third down package, just full package. I'm going James White. Power, Ron Dane. He's just a bowling ball, and no one can tackle him, man. He's just super thick legs. Just guys bouncing off of him. That's what made him so dangerous. He was obviously not like the fastest guy, but he just couldn't be tackled. And if it was a short yardage situation, you weren't stopping him. He's running through anybody, so I'm taking Ron Dane for power.
That would be one heck of a running back. You know what was really cool about that? He knew all those guys. Off the top of his head, he knows the history at that position at that school. That was like 7 guys going back to the 1990s, and he knew all about it.
I was super impressed by that, too. It's like he had a sheet in front of him, right? I know he has these guys, and they've got their picture up in the running back room and stuff, but he went through, he's like studied these guys. He's like, the pass catching ability and the third down package of James White. I'm like, yeah, he really could catch the ball. I was thinking about that, And then Melvin Gordon's stiff arm, I was like, I do remember a couple stiff arms, but I wouldn't have unless he recalled him just like that. And so it's been a special position there, right? And I think the big question moving forward for Braylon Allen, as we talked about, is what does that look like when maybe the running back isn't the centerpiece of what it's been in Wisconsin in years past, right? Because they've had some great ones. There's no doubt about that. And you can make a super running back out of all those backs, obviously.
Right. Yeah, there's a knock on younger people, right? They don't know the history of things. And there probably are some college players who earlier, when you said Drew Brees, are like, who? Because that's like already too old. But for him to go all the way back and get Ron Dane in there and know the specifics of those players, that was an impressive job by him. Attack the football season with some brand new head coaches. Northwestern, Wisconsin, Nebraska, and Purdue all have new men in charge of their programs. The last time there were 4 different head coaches in the Big Ten coming into one season was 2016. Now, for what it's worth, if you notice, none of those coaches on the left stayed at their schools.
They're all gone.
Very long. We hope for different results for the fans of these 4 fan bases, for sure. In general, what is your thought on the fact that we have 4 new head coaches in the Big Ten this year?
Well, obviously, there's some instances where it was a good takeover and sometimes it was a bad takeover. But I think in general, the level of coaching has risen, and I think it's a good thing for the present day Big Ten West, which we know isn't necessarily around that much longer, but also for the Big Ten Conference as a whole. I mean, you look at some of the guys we're going to talk about. These were some of the top coaches that you could possibly get that were in the market that they were able to get and say, hey, I want to build a program here.
Right, that's the thing. The Northwestern situation is obviously different from all the other 3,
right.
But Nebraska on paper, brilliant hire. Wisconsin on paper, brilliant hire.
Right.
Purdue on paper, one of the hottest young assistants at a major school already. So let's go one by one. We asked you to give a word to describe the coach and their new job together, and then explain why. Let's start off in Lincoln with Matt Rule at Nebraska.
I think identity for the Huskers. I mean, when Scott Frost came there, he made a mention of like, listen, I want the old school physicality of Nebraska with this Oregon spread offense. And to be quite frank, it never worked, right? Haven't gone to bowl game in years. They need to find out what's going to be their identity in the Big Ten, and how are they going to get players to be excited to play in Lincoln, Nebraska for Matt Rule. Now, I think Matt Rule can do it. Listen, he did it at Temple. He did it at Baylor. Much harder rebuilds. I mean, Temple, all I know about Temple is John Chaney from the NCAA basketball tournament, the head coach there in the 90s. That's all I knew about Temple. I never thought of him as a football school, but he won there. And he won at Baylor after some major off-field scandals that he rebuilt from and built them back into a power, right? In the Big 12. So there's certainly not any of those issues going on at Nebraska. They've got some personnel issues as far as can they compete and be dominant at the line of scrimmage like they need to be if they're going to compete in the Big Ten and especially in the Big Ten East as well when they have some crossover games. That's the big question. I think Matt Rule's the guy that will get it done. Do I think it's going to happen right away? Probably not, because it's a big rebuild. It didn't happen right away at Baylor, it didn't happen right away at Temple, but over time, he got that thing rolling.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think the expectation is he will get there sooner rather than later.
Sure.
But I agree. Nobody's expecting 10 wins this season.
Correct.
For Matt Rule. Luke Fickell at Wisconsin, a program that isn't down in the way Nebraska has been by any means, but it's down by the standards that Wisconsin has set at the last 30 years. What's the word for him?
I think balance, right? I mean, for so many years, we've seen a run-first attack from Wisconsin. We've seen great defense, great running backs, which were mentioned previously, but we've seen a run-first attack. And I'm looking for a balanced attack, especially the offensive coordinator, Phil Longo, who's coming over from North Carolina, did some great things with Drake May. They pulled out 3 quarterbacks from the transfer portal, and they're going to throw the football more. They're going to spread the football more out. I'm looking how is Phil Longo going to take this identity of Wisconsin football where they can recruit and develop great offensive linemen in that state and regionally, and mix it with, okay, we've got a spread offense, we've got a great marquee tailback in Braylon Allen, but we want to throw the football as well to take that next step so that we can win a Big Ten championship. And so I think balance is really the key word.
I've forever wondered why 5-star quarterbacks don't look at Wisconsin more often. You are going to keep your jersey clean if you are the quarterback at Wisconsin.
That's a good point.
And I think the thing that always prevented them as well, they just don't throw the ball enough. Well, now that's no longer the case. We'll see what Luke Fickell can do recruiting-wise there as well. The Boilermakers, Ryan Walters, first-time head coach. The word is?
Card, as in Hudson Card. And the reality is I'm a first-year head coach. I got to have a field general on the field as a quarterback. And if you're at Purdue, where the expectations, especially under OC Graham Harrell, who's out of that Texas Tech air raid scheme, is you've got to have a quarterback that can make a ton of plays, right? If you're going to throw the football all around. Hudson Card, I thought, was one of the, I wouldn't say sneaky best transfers, one of the best transfer quarterbacks out there. I mean, he started games at Texas, was a highly touted recruit. For Ryan Walters to come in and get him, I think within the first 2 or 3 weeks of him taking that job, I think gave a lot of confidence to the Purdue fan base and put the Big Ten on notice, because Ryan Walters is more than just a great assistant coach, a great coordinator. I'm one of the top coordinators. I would say Illinois led the league in scoring defense last year. But he's more than that. He has the ability to be a great head coach. And I think getting Hudson Card set the precedent for that whole football team in the offseason of like, we got a chance to win. We got a chance to compete in the Big Ten West this year. And so a lot of it falls on Hudson Card, though.
Couple notes on the Boilermakers, by the way. Our first tailgate of the season, the first Saturday, we will be in West Lafayette for our Purdue show, but also on Wednesday, 4 Eastern, 3 Central time, our crew will be at the Purdue training camp. So you can get a great look at what this first season of Ryan Walters is going to be coming up on Wednesday. I mentioned the fourth coach is Northwestern. David Braun takes over on an interim basis. Obviously, this is a very different scenario from everybody else, and no one is expecting this to be the full-time head coaching hire, but you never know. Stranger things have happened. What's the word for him entering the end of August?
I think united. I mean, you've lost so many players. There's so much division. There's a lot of allegations that are swirling about. But you got to focus on the guys that are there, the guys that are going to suit up for you on Saturday, and you got to keep them united with a plan offensively and defensively. I think if you can be united, you can limit the turnovers. They were minus 19 in turnovers last year. I don't know anybody who's awesome athletically or anything that could win minus 19. And if you're not great athletically or you're maybe shallower in your depth chart than other teams,
right,
it's a recipe for disaster. We saw that the last 2 years. They just were not competing, getting blown off the ball. So they've got to figure out how to take care of the ball, be united, and take it one game at a time. I mean, because there's a lot of stuff going on off the field, on the field. They've lost a ton of players, and it's just a huge, I don't want to classify it as a distraction because it's bigger than that, but it's hard to focus as a football team when there's so many off the field issues.
The odd but interesting note is they get one extra day to start the season because their first game doesn't come until Sunday. Sunday of that first week, they will play Rutgers, which is interesting. Also, there will be a spotlight. People are going to be watching football. There's no NFL on that Sunday, the last time until February that will be the case. So eyeballs that want football will be watching the Scarlet Knights and the Cats.